the shipping business has been through a lot of changes during all time. So maybe we shouldn't focus on that we have to change, but rather how to change, because we have to change all the time.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to episode 220. In September, I will be the anchor woman of the Baltic Port Conference in Ystad in the very south of Sweden. I will guide the participants through the 2-day program, and I know that we will be listening to some very interesting speakers and discuss the current situation of ports in the Baltic region, geopolitics, climate change, and technological developments, among other things. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to Mr Bogdan Oldakowski, the Secretary General of the Baltic Port Organization, BPO in short, and Mr Björn Boström, who is the Managing Director of the Port of Ystad and host of this year's conference. I asked them about the organization and what we can expect from this year's conference. I hope you will enjoy our conversation.
Every conversation matters.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, Baltic Port Organization, and the Port of Ystad. So, Bogdan Oldakowski, could you please introduce yourself and the organization you're working for?
Yes, of course. I will introduce Baltic Ports Organization and myself. I'm Secretary General of the Baltic Ports Organization since the year 2006, but the organization is much older. It was established in 1991, just after the collapse of Soviet bloc, and there were not new, but the countries that got free again: Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and also Poland. And the ports in those countries were not that advanced in, for example, in technology, in management, in operations, as the ports in other parts of Europe. So one of the main reasons for establishing the organization was to build a bridge between Scandinavian, German, Finnish ports and the ports in our part of Europe. Of course, there was also a lack of contacts, relations between people. So that was really a reason for BPO and the mission for BPO to build a bridge between those two regions for many years. But of course, with time, the environment and the trade, the European Union has been enlarged. So many things has changed. And now our role is more to lobby for Baltic Sea region as such and ports, just to have a right balance between different regions in Europe, between Mediterranean or Atlantic region, just to make sure that, for example, TEN-T policy and the money flow is equal between those regions in Europe. Of course, there are new challenges like climate, and this is also one of our priority in last years to do our most to protect the climate, to reduce emissions from ports activities, but also to work together with shipping lines. Digitalization is another thing that we are quite active now. There are also many smaller ports in the region, so-called comprehensive ports. So we are also having a special group for those ports. So with time, we have to also react, and our mission is somehow adjusting to new environment. And maybe at the end, I'd like to say that at the moment, We are about 50 major ports around the Baltic Sea, all countries apart from Russia.
And what is your background? How did you become the Secretary General?
Yes, I started my professional career in 90s, in last century. And after a few years, I started to work in Port of Gdańsk at that time. And I was kind of also pushed or maybe invited to work with international organizations like BPO, but also ESPO at that time. After some time, I became a chair of environmental committee. And after a few years, I decided to go for my own. I established my own company called Actia Forum. And again, after a few years, Crystal Wiman from Port of Stockholm, she was a chair of BPO at that time, asked me if I could run the office of the Baltic Ports Organization and me to be a Secretary General. So of course I couldn't refuse such a request from Crystal. So since that time I'm running the office of the Baltic Ports Organization, but I'm also running my own consultancy business.
So every year I understand you are gathering for an annual general conference.
Yes, one of our role and is to organize annual conference every year. Of course, there was a pandemic like 3 years ago, so we couldn't meet for 2 years. But now we are back in business. Last year we met in Gdynia, Poland, and this year in September we are meeting in beautiful town and port of Ystad.
So over to you, Björn, then. You are the managing director of the Port of Ystad. Could you please introduce yourself and where we're all going?
That's correct. To introduce myself, well, I have been in the ferry business, shipping business, actually almost 40 years now. It's 39 years in a row, but I had a very, very early start when I was only 14 years old, starting at the ferries between Helsingborg and Helsingør as a docker, actually during summertime. And maybe that and my father as a profession was a master of the seas. So shipping has always been quite a big interest for me. Before I came to the Port of Ystad in 2008, I was working in several ferry lines and ferry routes companies, mainly between Sweden, Denmark, and Germany, but also domestic ferry traffic in Sweden. Some say that in 2008 I went over to the dark side, but to be frank, my experience from shipping lines has been very good to create the understanding from the port side what the shipping lines actually need, and I know a lot about let's say the conditions the shipping lines are working under. So hopefully I have contributed to some good solutions in Port of Ystad, and we are growing. We are a growing port, one of the biggest ports in Sweden, mainly on the passenger side. So it's quite good. And actually, when I started 2008, one of my first, let's say, contacts with the other ports was through the BPO and Bogdan. And I feel that we have a very good organization and very important organization to use for all the ports around the Baltic, especially as Bogdan mentioned, to not, let's say, be better or worse than other regions, especially in Europe. But it's very important also for smaller ports to have someone speaking out for them. Sometimes the bigger ports with bigger, let's say, cash flow, they can use their money to lobby for solutions only mentioned for them. But many small ports are very important for the local region they are working within, and therefore the BPO is really doing a great job.
So going back to first week of September.
Yeah, coming to Ystad, this is of course a very big event for us, and we are very glad that we are able to host this year's conference. Ystad is a very beautiful city, as Bogdan mentioned, a small one, very narrow, with a very big port, an important port too. And for us, it will focus once again and putting both Ystad and Port of Ystad on the map. So we are very happy to host many colleagues from ports around the Baltic and even from shipping lines and other partners, let's say, around the port business.
So I understand we're going to talk about some really interesting topics. It's going to be trade in Europe, and it's going to be about the change we're all going through now. Industry Revolution 4.0. That is where we're all heading, isn't it?
Yeah, it's extremely important issues for the conference this year, but still, the shipping business has been through a lot of changes during all time. So maybe we shouldn't focus on that we have to change, but rather how to change, because we have to change all the time. We have to, let's say, follow up on the society's general expectations for shipping. And this is not only from the port side, but also from the ship owners side and all the business around the shipping.
And then we got the security issue. You mentioned that, Bogdan. I mean, it's all the ports in the Baltic Sea, which is a bit at the...
Yes. Well, when it comes to security, of course, we are all following what's going on in that part of Europe. I'm from Poland, so my country is a neighbor of Ukraine, and of course, this is a tragic story in Ukraine, and we all feel some consequences. But the consequences are different in even if our region is quite small, are different in different countries. Also, the consequences for the ports, for the shipping business. So we can see that quite many new dynamics in ports like Klaipėda, Riga, Tallinn, but also Finnish ports, because those ports, also Polish ports to some extent, those ports are serving the market, or used to serve the market of Ukraine, Russia. Now things got more complicated. Of course, there were a series of sanctions imposed on Russia and counter-sanctions. So at the moment, unfortunately, this is, of course, should be understood by everybody, but we are kind of building the trade wall between the West and the East. So there are not too much of goods going on between the East and our ports. This is, of course, not good. But as I said, it's not. We are not going to different directions in coming years. So new developments, and we can also see it in energy business. There were some new LNG floating terminals deployed in the Baltic. Poland is still burning some coal in our power plants, and the coal used to be imported from Russia. Now the coal is being imported from other destinations, from, I don't know, Australia, South Africa, America. So it's a completely change of trade direction. So quite many different implications. But maybe what is even more important, that we also see that NATO is extending in the Baltic. Finland joined, and hopefully Sweden will join shortly NATO. And so we hope to be more secured in near future in the port business.
And also talking about energy and also talking about new kinds of ships, electrification, Björn, new equipment in the port side.
Yeah, new equipment. I don't fear the electrification as such because it will come. You know, onshore power has been a major issue for our port, and already in 2012 we inaugurated at that time world largest onshore power system for delivering of power, both 50 hertz and 60 hertz. And it's been used since then, and it's used every day actually. I think the problem with electrification is, do we have enough power? Because we are competing with a lot of other industries, all going more electric, and you know, all the personal cars, and maybe even in the long run traction lorries will be electrified. Do we have sufficient power all the time, or do we have to find some solution so the port can charge some battery solutions when it's possible, and then be able to deliver power to the vessels when they can arrive? That is an issue that we have to consider all the time, that we cannot have a 100% timetable for delivering or for using power onshore, because the vessel can be several hours late, or maybe cancel some departure, and then they have to have some more hours of power. So that is an issue that I think the governments around the Baltic, they don't have so high up on their agendas. But that will be the most important thing for us in the future, because the technique is here, and it's developing all the time. Maybe, hopefully, it will be cheaper because it was very, very expensive when we started our electrification in our port. So the technique will be there as always, but do we have enough of power when we need it?
So who shall attend this conference?
Who usually attends the conference is, of course, our members from around the Baltic Sea, but also those who do the business with ports, shipping lines, transport operators, stevedoring companies from the ports, also administrations, policymakers. So all those who are kind of relations with the ports. And of course, usually there are also a stronger group of regional attendees. So I'm sure that there will be also a strong group from Ystad community. Isn't it so, Björn?
It sure will. I think also that we already feel that there is a great interest from media to cover this conference.
Okay, so next port of call, Ystad.
Every conversation matters.
Thank you, Bogdan and Björn. I look forward to meeting you and others interested in the future of ports in the Baltic region on September the 6th. Hey, we will also visit the film studio where the Kurt Wallander movies were filmed. I trust you know the internationally renowned commissioner and the author of the books, Henning Mankell. Go check out the program at balticportsconference.com and see you there. Until the next time, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available, and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.